And welcome, everybody, to the CUSA Podcast Roundtable. And wait a minute, is it week 5 of the college football season already? Is it really flying this quickly as we start getting to those classic CUSA midweeks in October? Shoot. Well, better enjoy the college football while we still can. I am Jake Gibson, the host of Pause Up Podcast. And joining me today is Jake Bolden of the Blue Raider Podcast and Kai Millette of the Owl Chat Podcast, two of the pods in the CUSA Podcast Roundtable, as we get excited for a clash of these two schools, Middle Tennessee and Kennesaw State. So, gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
I'm great, Jake. Thanks for having us on. Excited to get conference play started and kind of right some wrongs from non-con.
I'm good, Jake. Thanks for having me on. I'm just hoping that this year's edition of Kennesaw State, Middle Tennessee State is significantly more bearable than last year's.
Let's get into some analyzation here real quick. Before we even talk about the stats, before we talk about what to expect from this game, I want to talk vibes real quick, because unfortunately I feel like both squads, and therefore both of you guys, have different vibes entering this game over at Fifth Third Bank Stadium just outside of Atlanta. I want to start with Mr. Bolden here. As Middle Tennessee, well, you have that nice win against Nevada, but other than that, it's been not a great start to this season for the Blue Raiders, losing to an FCS squad. It's Wisconsin, so what? But then the tough loss to Marshall as well, 28 points, and still just about doubled you up there against the Thundering Herd. So to be starting this season 1-3 from a Blue Raiders perspective, is this kind of what you expected, or are you feeling just as disappointed as what I'm going to assume as many, that Austin Peay walked into your trap and took over the trap?
I think disappointed is to say the very least about where a lot of Blue Raider fans are, but at times we felt promising, and you thought maybe the expectations could still be met. A lot of fans, myself included, were thinking 6 wins is attainable because of how easy this schedule is and has been. You talk about Austin Peay, an FCS school that's just 2 hours down the road, came here, pretty much put the beat down on you, where they were the better football team for 4 quarters. And then you go to Wisconsin, like you talked about, just Wisconsin. Well, it's a Wisconsin team that's looking to fire their coach. I mean, they just got run out of the stadium to Maryland, who's already bottom of the Big Ten. So we were excited about going to Wisconsin because that's a P4 game you potentially should win if you're a better football team. And then you win at Nevada. You took them all the way to the wire there. You needed Nick Vattiato to resurrect this team in the 4th quarter. And even in Marshall, at the end of the 3rd quarter, we thought we were going to win that football game. We had scored on 3 straight drives. We had taken a lead. We were going to get the ball back with the opportunity to put it up by 2 scores, and then a personal foul happens. And then it was a penalty parade. We had 12 total penalties, took ourselves out of that game entirely. So you're just beating yourself in a game that you probably should have won. Again, for three quarters, we're already writing headlines that you're going to win that football game. And then you just find new ways to lose is how it feels here in Murfreesboro. So that's why I said at the beginning, you're trying to right some wrongs here. The vibes are not great, but there are moments where you think that this team has the potential to be great. And so maybe Kennesaw is where we thought we would find some hope, because after this you have Missouri State. So entering the season, you think the Conference USA slate is easy, and then Kennesaw uproots Arkansas State. And it's like, well, maybe it's not as easy as we thought. And even to bring it back, Missouri State, they beat Marshall. Marshall beat us.
Sure did.
Transitive property, you're going to start conference play 0-2. And that's just kind of how we feel right now.
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, you have Kennesaw State, which, I mean, okay, no one's discrediting you for starting 0-2 this season, right? Back-to-back power conference teams, but you give Wake Forest all they can handle. And then, Illinois does Illinois things. And I thought, well, that's that crazy beat down. Then they beat down Illinois by significantly more. And I was like, damn, maybe this Indiana team really is a big-time contender in the CFP. I digress there. So kind of expected to be 0-2, I'm assuming, Kai. But then to see them wallop Merrimack and then shock the college football world by taking down Arkansas State, a team that almost took down another CFP contender in Iowa State. Just talk about how you're feeling. 2-2 entering conference play. Are you more than okay with that?
Yeah, the program's riding about as high as it ever has been since I've been covering it. It's hard to take any stock in the first 3 games. You go back-to-back games against Power 4 opponents. Take Wake down to the wire. We're a couple games away from winning that one. And then Merrimack, it's an FCS team. You're not going to open the whole playbook. So the Arkansas State game was really the first thing to a full version of this team that we've seen all year. And in the first quarter, at least, we were all very impressed. Go up 21-0, and that game should have been 35-0 at halftime. The offense was humming. We've all been very impressed with the defense thus far. Other than the Indiana game, they've been great. And like you alluded to, that's Indiana. And now we're in a position where we're favored and at home against an MTSU team to open conference play. And you've got a chance to start 1-0 and potentially set up a big game when it comes to conference standings implications against Louisiana Tech the next week. But you can't look ahead. There are no gimmies at this level of college football, obviously. And you don't know that the team has learned that. It's just been such a weird position because I've been around a program and I've covered this program through so many L's and just depression, and it hasn't been fun, and now we're in a position where we're favored against a team at the FBS level, and it's unfamiliar territory. So it's like, how is this group going to respond to being in that favorite seat, being at home? It'll be interesting, but certainly the best mood the program has had in a few years.
Is this the first time that Kennesaw has been favored against a Conference USA opponent?
I believe that to be true. I don't think they were favored against FIU last year. I don't think they would have been favored in any of the games last year. I mean, they certainly weren't against Liberty, even though that was one of the wins. And then FIU might have been the closest. I think MTSU was around the same last year, but in MTSU's favor, it was like 7-8 swinging that way. So I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sounds good then. Currently, the Owls are favored. I believe 7 and a hook is the latest spread. I think it opened up 6 and a hook. It's actually gone up by a point since it opened. So a lot of faith in this Kennesaw State team. And as of recently, I think that's very much deserved. So Kai, I'll turn it over to you again here. The Owls so far, it felt like they had plenty of options as to who could be the guy at quarterback. We thought it was going to be Williams, but it's turned into Amari Odom. Talk about what makes this kid special in just a short amount of work. I think he really has proven himself to be QB1 here at Kennesaw, hopefully for the long haul.
Well, he sort of is the ideal quarterback prototype, right? He's 6'4", he's efficient, he's got a big arm, and he's mobile. Like, what else can you ask for, right? Heading into the season, and I talked about this on Jake's show a lot, he looked terrible in the spring, and we were told by the coaching staff that he had made progress of which they had never seen from the spring to the fall. And we didn't laugh at it, but we sort of dismissed it as like, hey, I hope that's true. Maybe he's in the running next year, but we still believed he was a depth piece. And Dexter Williams, who was a major investment from the donors and the administration, was going to be the guy this year. Dexter Williams started the season, didn't look too good against Wake, didn't look too good in a brief appearance against Indiana. But it's Wake in Indiana. It's like, how much stock are you going to put in that? So we all expect Dexter to still be the guy heading into Merrimack, sort of until further notice. They split snaps heavily. Odom got the start technically, but Dexter played about half the game. And it couldn't be more obvious that Odom was just the better quarterback. He gets the full-time start against Arkansas State. And I would imagine if he had come out and struggled in the first quarter, that Dexter might have gotten an opportunity. But Odom lit the world on fire. Scores 3 touchdowns in 3 possessions, has one of the best stat lines in college football of any quarterback this season. And he's a lot more mobile than I think we expected him to be. He started, I want to say, about half the season at Wofford the past year, and he's already got more rushing yards this season than he did that entire year. So that's been a pleasant surprise. He has gotten significantly more accurate than we expected him to be. I mean, against Merrimack, I want to say he was 12 of 14. Against Arkansas State, he was something like 25 of 35. And that's a legit completion percentage for this level. When you're not running the triple option or the pistol like we have been in years past. So if he can figure out how to hold on to the ball, he was sort of responsible. I mean, you got to read in between the lines a little bit, but he had 3 fumbles in the game against Arkansas State. If he can fix that fixable issue, he's got a chance to be one of the best in this conference.
So I'll turn it now over to Jake. Hearing that this Kennesaw State quarterback is going to be a dual threat kind of guy for this Middle Tennessee defense. This is a Blue Raiders defense that gives up about 173, just over 173 yards per game. That's the 4th most in CUSA behind New Mexico State. And interestingly enough, Western Kentucky and Liberty to give up the most rushing yards for a defense. So, just hearing that, what can we really expect from Middle Tennessee? Have they faced a genuine dual threat kind of passer so far this season? And if not, how do they adjust to getting ready to take on one against Kennesaw?
Well, they faced a similar type with Carlos Del Rio Wilson at Marshall this last week, a very big presence. It has the mobility if he wants to get out of the pocket, but has the ability to throw the ball. Kind of does. I would say Carlos Del Rio Wilson out of high school was a dual threat, but the longer he's been in college, he's kind of gotten more into a pocket presence kind of guy. So playing in Conference USA, I think the defense is accustomed to knowing that there's going to be mobile quarterbacks you're going to face on a week-to-week basis, and that's something that they've struggled with in the past. And I know when we talk about our keys to the game from MTSU's perspective, it's got to be to always contain the quarterback, because like we saw against Marshall last week, if they weren't throwing the ball, they started to run outside zone. And our defensive line, as good as they are, that lacks the depth. And same with the linebacker position. We already have a few injuries that have banged up the linebacker group as well as some of the secondary. So if anybody, not just a quarterback, breaks contain, we're very susceptible to giving up the big chunk plays that make scoring very easy, much like we saw with Marshall. They could just get 40, 50 yards either on the ground or through the air. It kills you. And not only that, but winning third downs is going to be a big part of any success this defense might have. I know if we have any chance of winning this game, it's going to be a big part on the defense being able to stop Odom and do their best to keep Odom and the Owls offense off the field.
I'll stick with you here, Jake, because I wanted to talk about Vadiato, who a lot of people were gassing up prior to the CUSA season being one of the more experienced certified pocket passers in Conference USA. And so far, the offense, I think, for Middle Tennessee passing-wise has been fine, but I certainly feel like there could be room for improvement as the season goes on. Talk a bit about some of the positives and struggles that you've noticed with this Middle Tennessee offense and what they need to get right as we get towards conference play.
I know there's some frustration internally about Vadiato being the quarterback. I know some people, even as early as Wisconsin, wanted to make a switch, but Vadiato's been who he's been the whole time. And maybe that is a frustrating part because he hasn't necessarily taken his game to the next level. I personally think a lot of that has to do with the OC Bodie Reader and some of the play calling, but I can't really use that excuse because Marshall last week, the play calling was great at times. I mean, you were able to put up you doubled your yearly average last week. So I can't make that complaint anymore. Now it's a matter of getting some consistency on the offensive side. And a lot of that has to do with penalties that have killed drives. Like I said, last week we had 12, absolutely just thwarted any late comeback possibilities. Even Austin Peay back in week 1, you just had so many 3-and-outs. I think they had 8 3-and-outs in that game against an FCS opponent, which Austin Peay has turned out to be a top 25 FCS program, but that doesn't excuse only putting up 14 points against them when you have weapons like Nick Vadiato, as you said, is one of the best in Conference USA. But really, the key to this offense, in my opinion, is running the football. They abandoned the run, in my opinion, earlier than they probably should. I mean, at Marshall, our first scoring drive was set up by a 72-yard run. where Jaquil Middlebrook, one of the more athletic running backs in this conference, broke free and set us up inside the 5-yard line. I mean, you can't always anticipate you're going to have a big run like that, but I think Jaquil is such an electric player. If you're not handing it off, finding ways to get him the ball in the flat, a check down, he's going to make plays happen. And I think we abandoned that playmaker a little earlier than I would like. And when you look at the passing numbers, they're okay. They could definitely be better, as you said. I just think game situations have put us into spots where we have to abandon the run game, have to throw more than maybe we feel comfortable doing, and it just kind of skews the numbers. When we see this offense clicking like we have at times last week, it's a good balance. It's a 50-50 run pass option. And until they find that consistency, we'll start to see that balance more and more. But the big outlier is the identity on the offensive side, and they just haven't really found that yet.
Kai, I'll turn it over to you now as far as how the defense is going to game plan against Vadiato. Now, there's something that is kind of worrying about Kennesaw State's defense. They have no interceptions. They're the only team in Conference USA to not have one, and that's very fortunate because UTEP only has one, and that's the second least in CUSA. What's gone on with the Kennesaw State secondary, and do you think this can actually be the week based on what you've seen with Vadiato that they can finally make some magic happen and get a pick?
I don't think that's reflective of the job the secondary has done so far this year. You go back to the Wake game, Robbie Ashford had nothing for 75 to 80% of that game. Obviously, Indiana's got a Heisman candidate in Mendoza and one of the best receivers in the country in Elijah Surratt. But even then, Caleb Offord, who has been one of the better surprises this year on the defensive end, did a really good job on Surratt for a lot of that game. Jericho Washington is a player who I think has Sunday potential. Not saying he'll get there. I think the secondary is one of the best units on this team. Is it frustrating that you don't have the interception yet? Yeah. There's a reason your DBs and your linebackers are playing on the defensive side of the ball, though. We've probably had 5 or 6 dropped picks this year, or missed opportunities for picks, and obviously that's frustrating. And you want to make those plays, but it's not because guys aren't there or where the coverage isn't good, if that makes sense. I thought it was really good to great at times against Arkansas State. It was good to great against Merrimack. I thought it was phenomenal against Wake. I mean, the defense was lights out all game against Wake. So I really don't think that's super concerning. You want to start forcing those turnovers. There's only one on the year, and that is something that jumps out at you. But when you watch the tape, it's not all that concerning, knowing you've got 2 pretty good corners and 2 pretty good safeties in the mix there.
Well said there. So let's start to move on here. And at this point, I'll open up the discussion to whoever wants to go first. It's going to be some of the biggest playmakers that you need to step up in a game like this from Kennesaw State's perspective to sort of prove the world right, and that it's the right thing for Kennesaw State to be favored, but you're going to need a specific playmaker or two to really take advantage of Middle Tennessee. And for MTSU's perspective, it's going to be these are the guys that are going to need to step up and make sure that we have a chance to take down Kennesaw State in their home turf. So I'll open it up here, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I don't mind starting. Gabe Benyard missed basically all of the last 2 seasons. In 2023, we were in the transition year, and he only played 4 games because he was trying to preserve his red shirt, did a lot of good things in those 4 games, but that season was sort of a wash and didn't really matter. And then last year missed about half to more than half of the season with injury. I think he ended up playing 7 games, but he was 100% for maybe 2 of them, or close to 100% for maybe 2 of them. And he's already put together one of the best years of any receiver in the conference. He's pushing 400 yards. He's gotten in the end zone a couple of times. He's had 200-yard games. And this is really his chance to put the conference on notice. So I think he needs to have a big day. He needs to show you who he is. And then, if they put extra emphasis on him, this MTSU secondary, it could be Christian Moss, the wide receiver 2, who spent time at the Power 4 level at Virginia Tech and actually got on the field and had a couple of catches 3 years ago back during his freshman season. He's a really talented player. And then on defense, Caleb Offord and Jericho Washington. You'd love to see him come up with a pick, but it feels like it's just a matter of time. And if they keep doing what they're doing, KSU will be just fine on defense. Barron Hobson is a tackling machine. I think he had 14 last week against Arkansas State. He just flies over the field. Him, Garland Benyard, the other Benyard brother, and Jaden Kelly are three guys that just fly around the field and just have a nose for the football. So those are the guys I'd want to point out.
Yeah, for the Blue Raiders side of things, on the offensive side, as far as weapons goes, whoever wears the number 1 for MTSU is assuredly going to be the best receiver. We saw Omari Kelly last year, who's now at Michigan State, who's the wide receiver 1 for the Spartans. This year, it's Najee Cox, a Fresno State community college transfer for the Blue Raiders. He leads the team by nearly double the receiving yards of anybody else. He's a kind of a shoe-in for someone that has to go well for the offense to have any sort of momentum at all. And it'll be interesting to see, as we previewed on our show, that matchup that Najee Cox will have potentially with Caleb Alford. I mean, a 1v1, true 1v1, it could make or break for the Blue Raiders if Najee Cox doesn't come up winning a lot of the 50-50 balls. Because outside of that, there's not many weapons that have at least shown signs. We know Miles Butler is the returning wide receiver from last year, the second leading receiver, which doesn't say much because your third leading receiver is your running back. And then past that, it's been a bunch of misfits that haven't really come to fruition yet that we thought would lead this wide receiver group. But in the backfield, we already know Vadiato, Jaquil Middlebrook, who I just said, running back, kind of been the star outside of Vadiato and Najee Cox because of his dual threat ability out of the backfield. And then Ricky Hunt Jr., who's kind of your bruiser of a running back. But we just haven't seen much of him because I said they don't really utilize the run game much. But those guys, if the offense is moving, those are key parts of what makes that offense special. Those guys are very talented. The offensive line has been better than last year, but that's not much that's not much to say, really, to be honest. I think both of these teams in particular have struggling offensive lines who are going to be the Achilles heel for the team that loses this game. But the defensive side looks great. We have one of the better defensive fronts Conference USA has to offer. I know the scores don't really indicate that. They're giving up a lot of points, but a lot of that has to do with the longevity. The offense only plays 20 minutes. That means your defense out there for 40 minutes a night. When you play the likes of Wisconsin and Big Ten football, those offensive linemen leaning on you, it becomes a long football game. And same with Marshall for that matter. It just became a long football game for those guys in the front. But names like DeMonte Smith, who is one of the leaders in Conference USA as far as tackles for loss. You also have Reggie Johnson, who's been a surprising young guy that has 1.5 sacks this year. Parker Hughes returns at middle linebacker. The leading tackler for the Blue Raiders, Muaz Byard, who has a relationship with Kevin Byard, as those that may know for the Chicago Bears this year. So a guy that kind of rolled into a starting position because of an injury to Alex Mitchell, a transfer who could be back any day now, but Muaz Byard has really earned his keep at this point, being the second leading tackler for the Blue Raiders. But the secondary has been an area that we thought would be improved, and they have been the biggest liability thus far. CB1 last year, De'Ari McDonald returned this year, got a waiver, was able to return, and he's not even the starting cornerback. So that would lead you to believe the cornerback position got better. Unfortunately, we haven't seen signs of that. Trayvon Farrell was kind of the better of our cornerbacks, but he's currently fighting day to day right now to get back to the field at Kennesaw. So I like to think that maybe because it's conference play, they were holding those guys out because these games matter a little bit more than your Marshall Week 4 matchup non-conference. But as we look to this conference game, hopefully we'll see the best of these guys. But to put it again back to what matters most, the defense has to be good, but they have to keep Kennesaw off and give this offense an ability to find those weapons and make this a ball game.
Well spoken there, Jake, from one Jake to another. So I'll open it up here again. Whoever wants to go first here. What's the biggest mistake that either Kennesaw State or Middle Tennessee have to avoid in this matchup, whether it's the penalties or the turnovers or the mental mistakes or something else? Something else that comes to your mind. What's the biggest thing that your team has to avoid to not just stay in this game but actually win it?
For KSU, it's unforced turnovers, or avoidable turnovers is probably the more appropriate term. You were a couple of those away from beating Arkansas State by multiple touchdowns. And then you feel even better heading into the rest of the season. I mean, there was a point where they got down to the one, botched snap, you turn the ball over inside the 5. That just can't happen. I mean, that's such a massive swing in momentum in a game and on the scoreboard. You need to avoid that. And what concerns me is all I've heard today. This is my 5th podcast or outlet I've done today talking about this game, with MTSU people or Conference USA people. And all I've heard about MTSU is this front 7. And that worries me because Kennesaw State's offensive line is still very much a work in progress. They can pressure the quarterback. Amari Odom's hands and maybe his rush decision-making is still going to be raw. And there's a great potential to force some unfortunate turnovers for KSU. So that's what jumps out and concerns me. You just got to hold on to the rock. That's the bottom line.
From week to week, it's been something different. Like week 1, it was the play calling and 3 and outs. And then week 2 at Wisconsin, it was the inability to finish drives, get Wisconsin off the field on 3rd down. Nevada, you couldn't move the football at all, really, because of Nevada's defensive front. Even Western Kentucky had their problems this last week just to kind of prove how good that Nevada front is. And then this last week, it was the penalties. So I guess if patterns matter, it means that it's going to be something unforeseen that's going to be the biggest issue for the Blue Raiders. Recency bias would say penalties. I mean, penalties took you out of that second half at Marshall. So if you have more penalties like that against Kennesaw State, you can forget any chance to win. I guess it always leans on the offense. Can the offense move the ball like we've seen at times? But I guess really this team, at times we thought that they would iron out all the little stuff and be better at the little stuff and then collectively be a better football team. We just haven't seen that. So I would like to think that whatever it is, it's just going to be the little things, the stuff that you can control. You can't leap on special teams. That's a personal foul. Like you can't hold when you have a 50-yard rush. It's the little things that you would think in year 2 of Derek Mason would be cleaned up, and we're still fighting those demons going into conference play. And that is reason for concern because the margin's thin. When your team is not that good and wins are won on fourth quarter drives at Nevada, you can't afford to have slip-ups in the first and second quarter. They come back to bite you. Games aren't lost on one play. It's a collective effort for 60 minutes. And until they put together a full 60 minutes, I think this team's going to have a long season ahead.
What's the forecast looking like for Saturday, Kai, over at Kennesaw?
It's a great question. I actually don't know, and I won't be at the game. It's a rare miss for me, but I'll pull it up for you right now. It says we got a 50% chance of thunderstorms on Saturday.
Uh-oh.
So take that into account.
So if the
Lightning are rolling in, the Blue Raiders and their Lightning are rolling into Kennesaw.
If field conditions are wet and sloppy, who does that favor?
Probably the team that can run the ball, and that hadn't been the Blue Raiders.
It hasn't really been Kennesaw State either. I mean, you're probably hovering around 3.7, 3.8 yards per carry. The running backs have had their moments, but the offensive line as a whole, it's underwhelming in pass block. It's underwhelming in run block. And you're okay with that because it is so new, and you've got 5 guys who are playing together for the first time. And the hope is that that will be better by the end of the season. But as of right now, there's still a lot to be desired there. So I don't know. I mean, Kennesaw State playing at home, at least there's some familiarity there. It was a cold, wet game up in Murfreesboro last year, and it seemed to just harm both teams. So,
okay. So neither team will have the advantage. Instead, we're better off maybe getting some football follies out of a mess like this. Good to know. It'll certainly make for an interesting watch if that happens. Maybe it won't. Maybe I'll get lucky, not have to endure a 2-hour rain delay like a certain team down in South Florida at South Dade Kia Field at Pitbull Stadium. Alrighty then. So I'll turn this question first to Jake, and just first I want to hear how confident you are that Middle Tennessee can actually win this. Like if you were to outright pick them, would you? And second of all, if they were to get the job done, how do you see that actually playing out on the gridiron?
Well, if you follow us on social media at CUSA Podcast Roundtable, you'll see that I have not picked the Blue Raiders to win this game. I just don't like it. I haven't seen promise, and until again, I see some consistency on both sides of the ball, then I'll start to be a little bit more optimistic about my Blue Raiders. But if they were to win this game, it would have to be I feel like I apologize for those that have been listening this entire time, but I'm going to say it again. The offense has to roll. They have to start early, and they have to score often to stay within this football game. I think if we do win, the defense is going to be a huge part of that and containing Amari Odom. But if you can't score more than, your prior to Marshall, if you can't score more than your 14 points per game average, you're not going to win very many football games, especially at the G5 level where we've seen the best teams in this conference at least average 21 points. So it's going to be an uphill battle. And like Coach Mason said, winning this game would put the non-conference in our rearview mirror. It would right a lot of wrongs, but I just, until I see some of this consistency and these mantras that he likes to use come out, I think it's going to be tough sledding at Kennesaw.
Kai. Uh-oh. Yeah, okay, there we go. So, Kai, the Owls have a chance to start off the CUSA slate on a massive high note, and who knows what can happen after that. When you have momentum, it's a scary thing. So, if they're able to pull this off and take down Middle Tennessee like everyone's expecting, what do you think this would mean for the Owls moving forward, and how confident are you that it's actually going to happen?
You get to start having different conversations. The Arkansas State win sort of spurred hey, we could maybe go win 6 looking at the schedule and make a bowl appearance, which would be a huge deal for the program. So those conversations have already started rolling. Now, internally, it doesn't change, right? The Barclay, a former Owls defensive lineman who we have on our show, made a great point. It's your boss isn't changing his expectations for you based on your performance in the first quarter, right? The expectations are still the same as you begin the season with. So it would be hard to complain and be upset about 4 to 5, maybe 6 wins, right? But now you started having bowl talks. If you beat MTSU, which you're supposed to, right? Vegas thinks you're supposed to. You've won back-to-back. You're at home. There's just a different feel right now than there has been in 2 years. You're at 3-2, and you host Louisiana Tech next. With a 1-0 record in conference, and the way things are shaping up, it looks like Louisiana Tech is positioning themselves as a contender in Conference USA this year. That becomes a huge game. But, you don't want to start thinking about that and talking about that because this program is in no position to overlook MTSU. An impressive win over Arkansas State that should have been a greater margin of victory than it was is not reason to write off MTSU. This is a conference opponent that wants to come in and beat you. They beat you last year. They've got plenty of talent on both sides of the ball. They've got plenty of experience on both sides of the ball. They're coached by a guy who's been around the block, despite what the consensus opinion on him at the moment might be. He's coached in the SEC. He knows the magnitude of these types of games, and they're going to be playing desperate. The non-conference season didn't go the way MTSU wanted it to, obviously. But as Jake has alluded to, and as Mason has alluded to in his press conferences, the real season starts now. So they're gonna give you their best shot. So it's really hard to not look ahead, knowing what is possible if you quote unquote take care of business like Vegas thinks you should. But I just don't think you can look past this game quite yet.
First of all, Kai, thank you. Second of all, when you say Jake, you're going to need to be a bit more specific than usual here. I'm just saying, but I'll turn it over to the Middle Tennessee Jake here real quick, just to hear your thoughts on what the future would look like for Middle Tennessee if they were to start the season 1-4. Are the fans already calling for maybe some changes to be made? But if you actually go 1-4 with your chances of bowl eligibility slipping extremely fast, what do you actually see happening?
Well, we're in the second year of Derek Mason, and he signed a 5-year contract whenever he did sign. And so the big thing that, of course, we've already looked into this because a lot of people were calling for his head after losing by nearly 3 touchdowns to Austin Peay. So we looked into what would happen. And so, if he were to stay here after this year, his buyout would still be the remainder of that contract, which is $3 million. If we waited till after year 3, that $2 million would, get cut in half to $1 million. So the likelihood is he's going to probably stick around until 3 years. unless it gets astronomically bad. And last year, 3-9, you give them some grace. It's year one. But if you go from 3-9 to, I mean, I don't see this team winning more than 2 games, to be honest with you. Missouri State has beat Marshall, a game that you probably should win, and you're going to, transitive property, lose that game. And then if you lose to Kennesaw State, a team who has already leaped over you after 1 year. So we're going to find out, do we go ahead and, forego the $2 million to wait 2 more years to fire him, or do we get it out of the way now? Because if he goes 1-11, you might have that conversation. And then another topic of discussion locally for those that might want to keep an eye on this in Conference USA, the mayor of Murfreesboro said today on his own public show on Facebook, said that MTSU needs some leadership changes within the university. And so if he's calling for some changes at for the presidency here, that creates a domino effect for what the new president might say for an athletic director, what that might say for a new football coach. So a lot could really happen here if things really do go south, because football, as we all know, is a big moneymaker for a lot of these universities. And if you win 4 games in 2 years, the pressure is going to be applied. So to answer your question, I think in a real world possibility, it's probably nothing will happen. But if this course stays true and he goes 1-11, your hand might be forced. Well, if you're MTSU.
What did they go 2-10? But their other win is in the 100 miles of hate. Is there at least a little bit of solace there?
I would feel better, but to be honest with you, I mean that is an interesting question. I don't know. They always say that's the one game you got to win every year, but we haven't won that. And I know Moffitt's got a day counter, which he might throw up at. It says over 2,000 days since we've beaten him, but I might feel a little bit better. But I think, unfortunately for Mason, that's not the last game of the year. We'll have lost a few games between then and the end of the year, but I don't think it would save him.
Don't worry about it. We had a counter going not our way for the Shula Bowl. We finally got that snap, that account. I'm sure, hopefully it's deactivated. Speaking of FIU, it's nice. This is a great episode for me. The last one I hosted was New Mexico State and La Tech, 2 teams FIU doesn't play, so all the research kind of went up in smoke. This time around, though, I'm going to be more prepared now for Vice Night when the Owls come to town. And when we head out to Murfreesboro, a place that FIU normally does not do well at. So maybe that'll be your next win here. Who knows? Who knows? We can't look into the future that much. Kai, I'll ask you something interesting here. Let's say Jake Bolden or maybe some of the other Middle Tennessee faithful want to make the trip down. Give them some recommendations. I'm guessing you have to fly into Atlanta, then head over to Kennesaw. Or maybe there's something else I'm unaware of. Where should they stay? What should they eat? And what's the experience like over at Fifth Third?
I mean, for the MTSU crowd, it might be the most feasible road, other than, Western Kentucky. I guess it'd be the second most feasible road trip in the conference. So I wouldn't recommend flying. It'd probably be a waste of your money and your time. Plus, it's a pretty drive down from Murfreesboro, going through the mountains and going through Chattanooga. I always love making the drive up. Drive down is probably a little more underwhelming because you go from pretty to less pretty the further you go down. Kennesaw is a nice area. If you want, the bar scene and some of the fancier restaurants, you're going to go 15 minutes down south to Marietta. Kennesaw is way more of a family type community place. It's not very rambunctious if that's what you're looking for. We do have Whataburger. I don't know if that's made its way into Tennessee quite yet. But we were the first in the Southeast or whatever it was, and that was a major event down here. Miller's Ale House is a good sports bar, a couple feet from my apartment, literally, to show up early and maybe catch some of the games. Beyond that, downtown Kennesaw has several good spots. That's about 10-15 minutes away from campus, but parking is convenient, free in most spots, and all sorts of different restaurants. We've got this chain called Gus's Chicken, which started in Memphis and made its way down to several locations in the major metro Atlanta area. It's the best fried chicken I've ever had. There's a location in downtown Kennesaw. Trust me, try it out. It's so worth it. But yeah, I mean, you find what you want down here. It should be a fun trip for anybody who decides to make the trek down.
All righty. Any final thoughts from either of you guys before we wrap up here, gentlemen?
I don't think so.
Survive. I would like to stay healthy and give ourselves a shot at Missouri State, but other than that, I'm sad.
Oh.
Is it that bad?
It does feel. I mean, when you lose to your 2-hour rival down the road, it doesn't get any better.
And how much did they pay Austin Peay too?
We looked into it. I don't know the figures exactly. I mean, any dollar amount over $10 still hurts. That's not a game for you because that's a rivalry that dates all the way pre-2000 when MTSU was in the FCS and OVC. But that's a school you owned for a very, very long time, and now they've caught up to you in 2025.
Well, I hate to leave you on that bummer, but that's just the way it rolls sometimes. So. All right, Middle Tennessee heading to Kennesaw State. That is going to be this Saturday, the 27th at 6 o'clock Eastern, or if you're in Jake Bolden time, 5 o'clock, I think. It can be seen on ESPN Plus as well, but should be a fun one. So thank you for watching. It's the USA Podcast Roundtable. Week 6 is interesting. Not a whole lot of action going on there. Jake, do we have an idea on what the game of the week could be for them? Is it still a work in progress?
It is still a work in progress now that we've kind of completed through everyone except for Missouri State, who hopefully we'll have on in a couple weeks. But I think last I had looked, Western Kentucky had an interesting matchup. I'm trying to remember, the schedule in particular, but
week 6 has, let me double
Western
check.
Kentucky and Delaware. Yeah, that was that one. If it's not that, it's going to be Sam Houston, New Mexico State. But I think those that are interested seeing New Mexico State get beat down by La Tech, I think Western and Delaware would be a better matchup.
Well, how about that? I think New Mexico State takes on Sam Houston, so it could be an interesting battle there. Who the heck knows? But we'll keep you all entertained until then before we make the announcement. So thank you all for watching this Game of the Week preview for the CUSA Podcast Roundtable. Until next time, go watch some football. Goodbye.